Real stories, real people. On a hill above Louisville, wrapped in fog and silence, stands a building that seems to breathe on its own. During the tuberculosis epidemic, thousands came seeking pure air and found death. They say that after nightfall, the wind still repeats the last breaths of those who never left. This is the place where the air turned into silence. A true story that took place at Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky, between 1910 and 1961. Waverly Hills Sanatorium opened its doors in 1910 when tuberculosis was devastating Kentucky. People believed the pure air on the hill would heal the sick, but the hospital soon overflowed. Every room echoed with coughs, prayers, and the metallic clatter of instruments. Doctors worked day and night, trying to save lives that faded one after another. From afar, the building looked like a refuge. Up close, it was a fortress of pain. And when the wind blew from the valley, many swore they could hear cries mixed with the creaking of open windows. Before the sun rose through the fog, the hospital was already awake. The corridors echoed with the metallic sound of trays and the muffled murmurs of nurses gliding like white shadows between the beds. The air carried the persistent scent of disinfectant and dampness, a smell that clung to the skin and to the soul. The gray light filtering through the fogged windows made everything feel suspended, as if even time hesitated to move forward. No one spoke of those who didn't wake up. The beds simply stood empty, and by the next morning, someone new was already lying there. Beneath the hospital, a narrow concrete tunnel ran from the morgue to the hillside below. They called it the body chute, though in the official reports it was simply the service corridor. Every night, stretchers rolled through the darkness, wheels echoing on wet cement. The workers said the air was heavy there, too still, too quiet, as if it waited for something. Sometimes, when the elevator stopped, they swore they heard another set of footsteps following behind them. No one ever checked. Even today, the tunnel breathes out a damp wind, like a sigh from underground. At night, Waverly Hills felt like another world. The wind pressed against the long windows, carrying a sound that could have been breathing. Nurses walked the halls with kerosene lamps, their footsteps swallowed by the echoing tile floors. Patients whispered to one another, convinced someone moved beyond the curtains when the lights flickered. In the upper ward, a doctor swore he saw a shadow lean over a bed, though every patient was asleep. Outside, the fog thickened, wrapping the building like a second skin. Those who worked the night shift learned not to look too long into the dark, because sometimes the dark looked back. Nurses stopped opening certain doors after midnight. Behind them, the air felt thick charged, as if the rooms were holding their breath. Doctors walked the halls with trembling hands, their eyes hollow from endless shifts and sleepless nights. The generator's hum was the only sound, until it failed. Then came the silence. Every droplet from the ceiling echoed like a heartbeat. When the lights flickered back, charts had shifted, tools had moved, and chairs faced the walls as if someone had been sitting there, watching. One nurse wrote in her journal, "The hospital doesn't rest, it listens." And in that stillness, they began to realize maybe it wasn't the patients who were being observed. By the winter of 1928, Waverly Hills was drowning in its own silence. Every bed was filled. Every corridor turned into a ward. The nurses hid their trembling hands behind white masks, their eyes red from exhaustion and fear. Bodies were moved quietly at night, down the elevator that never stopped. A doctor collapsed during rounds and was carried away on the same stretcher he had once pushed. Some patients whispered they saw familiar faces standing beside their beds, names already crossed from the records. The staff called it stress, delirium, fatigue. But deep down, they all knew the truth. The air that once promised healing had learned to listen and to remember. In the final months before Waverly Hills closed, something strange began to echo through the halls. At first, it was just footsteps, soft, measured, belonging to no one. Then came the doors, creaking open by themselves, the nurse bells ringing long after their patients were gone. A young nurse left a recorder running one night, hoping to prove it was only the wind. When she listened the next morning, she heard breathing slow, uneven, followed by a single word whispered through static, "Stay." The doctors laughed, called it fatigue and nerves. But the voice returned, night after night, always near the 5th floor. And in time, everyone stopped laughing and started listening. In the final days before Waverly Hills closed, the staff began locking the wards one by one. But every night, something unlocked them again. Lights turned on in rooms with no power. Doors opened onto walls where corridors used to be. A doctor carrying records swore he took the elevator to the 3rd floor, yet when the doors opened, there was only a hallway lined with fog, leading nowhere. The next morning, it was gone. Nurses began marking their paths with chalk like miners underground, afraid the hospital itself was moving around them. And when one of them whispered, "Maybe it doesn't want to be empty," no one dared to disagree, because the air seemed to listen. When Waverly Hills finally closed its doors in 1961, the last nurses turned off the power, sealed the tunnels, and walked away. But that night, locals saw lights flicker across the upper floors, slow, deliberate, one room after another. The electricity had been cut hours before. Days later, police found everything untouched. Beds made, curtains drawn, medical charts still open on desks. And yet, one pillow bore the mark of a head, as if someone had just risen. Reporters called it hysteria, imagination fed by fog and grief. But photographs taken that week show a glow in the upper windows, faint, warm, unmistakably human. Some lights, it seems, never learn how to die. Today, the building stands empty, its windows shattered, its roof sinking beneath the weight of time. Ivy crawls through the cracks where voices once echoed. Visitors come with cameras and flashlights, whispering the same stories they once heard as children. They say that if you stand in the main corridor at dawn, you can still hear the beds rolling, the bells chiming faintly through the mist. The air smells of rust, rain, and something older, something that waits. Sunlight filters through broken glass, painting the walls the same pale green they once were. Some call it memory, others energy. But everyone agrees on one thing. Waverly Hills isn't haunted by death, it's haunted by breath. I joined Linda Vista Community Hospital in late 1990. The place had a reputation not just for being underfunded, but for being strange. The building looked tired, like it had been holding secrets for far too long. Budget cuts, faulty equipment, nurses quitting mid-shift. Everyone had their reasons, but I needed the job. On my first night, they assigned me to the old surgical wing. It hadn't been renovated in decades. The lights flickered, and the air, it felt heavy, like something was watching. It was just after 2 a.m. I was at the nurse's station, reviewing patient files, when I heard a faint humming. It wasn't coming from any equipment nearby. It sounded distant, soft, but constant, almost like a tune. I looked down the hallway, but the lights were still. I thought maybe the vents were acting up again. Then I heard it again, but louder. This time, it wasn't just humming. There was crying. A child's cry, coming from the old surgical wing, which was supposed to be locked. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The sound was coming from room 307, an old surgical suite no one had used in years. The crying had stopped. The silence was worse. I stood outside the door, trying to listen. Then, I saw movement. Just for a second. A figure, small and pale, standing just inside the room. She looked like a little girl, wearing a hospital gown, dark eyes, expressionless. And then, she was gone, like she had evaporated into the air. I stood frozen for what felt like a full minute. My heart was pounding. The room was empty now, but I could still feel her, like the air had changed, like she was still nearby. Suddenly, the door creaked shut behind me. All by itself. I didn't wait to investigate. I turned and ran down the hallway, back to the nurse's station. I locked the door behind me and sat there in silence, trying to understand what I had just seen. The rest of my shift felt like a blur. I didn't leave the station again, but the noises didn't stop. I kept hearing soft footsteps above me, on the floor that had been closed for years. Once, I thought I heard someone whisper my name. I checked the monitors. Every room was empty. Then, at around 4 a.m., the surgical light in OR3 flicked on by itself. No one was scheduled in that room. It wasn't even connected to power anymore. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Who would believe me? But the next night, one of the orderlies came to the station. He looked pale. He said he'd seen a little girl near OR3. She wasn't on any patient list. He thought she was lost, until she turned the corner and vanished. He asked if I'd seen anything strange lately. I just nodded. That's when I knew it wasn't just me. Something was really happening in that wing. On my last week at the hospital, something happened I still can't explain. It was around 3:30 inches the morning. I was alone at the station, doing my final round of notes. Then the intercom turned on. Just static at first. Then a voice. Male. Calm, but wrong somehow. It said, "Initiate protocol." That's all. No department. No room number. Just those two words. I asked who it was. The static cut out. No one answered. After that night, I stopped trying to rationalize things. There were too many signs. The lights turning on by themselves. The whispers. The little girl. The voice on the intercom. It wasn't a coincidence. That wing was cursed. Everyone knew it. They just didn't talk about it. Some nurses avoided the entire floor. One told me she wouldn't even walk past room 307. Said she saw something once. Wouldn't say what. She just looked at me and said, "That room should have stayed sealed." I handed in my resignation the next morning. No explanation. Just a signed form and my badge. They didn't ask questions. I think they knew. I packed up my locker, walked out, and never looked back. But that doesn't mean I left it all behind. Some nights, I still wake up at 3:30, still hear that voice in my head, initiate protocol, and sometimes, just before I fall back asleep, I swear I hear something whispering outside my door. I've worked in other hospitals since then. Nothing like Linda Vista. Nothing that felt wrong. But it never really left me. That girl, that voice, that room. Sometimes I wonder if it followed me. Sometimes, late at night, I catch movement in the corner of my eye, or hear humming through the walls. Always faint, always at 3:30, and I never check, because deep down, I know that if I look, she'll be standing there, just watching.